He was so good in his first spell, they called him Awesome Dawson. Michael Dawson on the way will tell you about his first spell at the club, his time going on to play for Tottenham and England, back to Hull, and then finally back to Nottingham Forest, and a pretty unhappy second spell. He'll tell you all about it. Michael Dawson on the way next. Well, Dawson, lovely to see you again. Let's start with, two spells at Forest. How do you look back on them both, really?
Well, I think my first spell was a long one from the age of 9 when it all started in your dreams of becoming a professional footballer. I suppose there's hundreds of players that I played with, and unfortunately, don't get to have the career that I had. But you don't believe, and then at the age of 14, you sign. That's probably when you think you're down there every weekend, train on a Friday night from up in Yorkshire, get there at 8:30, 3 hours later. It's hard. You train on a Saturday, play on a Sunday, you're home, school holidays down. But I think my career really kicked on was when I left home at 16, became a youth team player. And within probably 18 months, I was on the fringe of the first team. And it was an incredible transition from where I was probably 14, 15, found it very hard, growing into my body. But then when I became a YTS player and 17 professional, I just kicked on. Paul Hart has got to take an awful lot of credit for that. It was incredible for me, the discipline, day in, day out. He was relentless. He was tough, but he had the standards, and that's what he kept. And he gave me my debut, and my first season was probably my best one. It really was. I went into the team with no fear, confident. I think I showed everyone what I could do, and then I got glandular fever, and it took it out of me for a few years. I started picking up injuries, which I'd never ever had in any of my career, all the way to the age of 18. I'd never had any of this. You just thought it was like playing football in the park. And I always say to players, that's what makes you the best. It's easy to get there. No, it's not. But you need the opportunities to stay there because then expectation and pressure comes. Everyone thinks you're the best player. Then all of a sudden, I took a dip. I had hamstring injuries. I had a hernia, and I was struggling with fitness, and that's how it was. And it was disappointing after my first year, getting to the playoffs, playing 35, 36 games, I think it was, and then getting sent off in the semi-final. That was probably the heartbreak. I was in tears in the dressing room, devastation. That look, we'd done incredible, which no one expected us to do. We were a young squad with a few senior players that were absolutely magnificent. There really were. You talk about Wardy in goal, Matty Lewis-John, who was mid-20s, a lot older than what us young lads were, but wasn't a senior player. Jimmy on the other side, characters of the dressing room. Des alongside myself. We had Ricky Skimiker in midfield. We had Hooks, David Johnson, Marlon, Reedy. We had a core, Gareth Williams, core of players, a mix. And I think that was the youth and experience that helped us. The younger lads played with freedom, like you're playing with in the youth team, and no pressure. And the older lads helped us. We had an incredible season, but we came up short in the playoffs against Sheffield United. And from then, unlucky for Paul Hart, we lost players, and you lose your best players. Ultimately, you don't have the season, and the manager gets sacked. And it was hard then, and it was an eye opener for me to see what it was like. Paul leaving, he'd had me as a youth team player, first team player, and then a new manager comes in. It's completely different, but incredible. My first experience as a first team player.
When did you think
to where we got to in that first season?
Dawson, when was the first time when you thought I could make it as a professional footballer? Were you kind of 8 or 9, or were you halfway through that first season? When did it kind of? Because someone like me, that thought had never occurred to me. But when did it kind of occur to you?
It's a good question, that, Robin. I don't know when you think you're going to become, because it's not about playing one game. It's about sustaining it for 20 years. And this is now I look back and I finish. I pinch myself and forever grateful for what I achieved, not just for myself, for my family, my teammates, and that comes to them. But I don't know, really. It's a good question. You always dream. I always dreamed of being like Andy, my oldest brother, and Kev, playing in the garden. You always want to be like your older brothers, and that's how I was. Andy left at 9, 10, I think, went to Scunthorpe, and I'd go and watch him at 14, 15, thinking playing in front of you, a few thousand, getting man of the match, going to players bar after, and everyone knows him, and he's got man of the match and played, and you just dream about it, I suppose. And then even when I did get my debut, my mum and dad were there, and Kev was on the bench. It was bizarre. Kev was 2.5 years older than me, and he was sub. So I don't really know. I can't answer that when I thought I was going to be a professional footballer. You leave home at 16, so that's your first opportunity. You sign at 14, and I didn't do well from 14 to 16. I was probably fortunate that I'd had my experience that my dad had experienced getting released from Manchester United at 16. My mum and dad made sure that wasn't going to happen because I wasn't great. But then from the age of 16, wow, everyone who was far superior to me at that age, I then made the gap and went ahead of them. It was all I dreamed of doing. I find it hard as a schoolboy doing your school, being away every weekend, the dedication and getting home late on a Sunday night and then school on a Monday. It's hard. It is hard. But as soon as I left home at 16 and I was so focused and give everything I could to be a professional footballer, and you need a little bit of luck. You need a manager to have faith in you, and Paul had that. And while I was out injured, you're thinking, this isn't luck, this is hard, but it's how you deal with that. And that was the hardest thing of being a footballer, being injured. I hated every minute of it. Even when I wasn't picked by a manager, it was not a problem. I could train, I could try and change their opinions. But when you're injured, you're in the gym on your own. It was my worst time of being a career. My wife would tell you the same. I was never the same when I was injured. It was terrible. You had to watch what you eat. And then when you came back, it was hard to get that fitness and momentum. It was a nightmare, absolute nightmare being injured. And I feel for any player going through it.
You came into the side with Des Walker effectively alongside you. How much, I mean, maybe you didn't feel it at the time, maybe you did, but how much looking back was that somebody that kind of helped you through those first dozen games or so?
Oh, massive. He was brilliant, Des. He never shut up. He was always talking. Sit next to him in the dressing room, he would chew your ear off. But just to look up to him, England international, played all over the world, played in the Premier League, and then to come back and help me as an 18-year-old had. I was one of those lads that I always wanted to improve. I always listened. Everything that they said, I take on board. So Des was brilliant for me like that. I mean, Paul was relentless. I remember we're losing in one game, he shouted at me, and most players would have crumbled. They really would nowadays. You couldn't speak to players the way I got spoke to. If I was a 36, 37-year-old in a dressing room with an 18-year-old and a manager spoke to an 18-year-old, I would feel for that young kid. I would go out my way to try and help him. But that's just how it was in those times. And Paul was only trying to get the best out of me in a first-team environment. But Des was always there for me.
And when you came to the end of that season, you obviously got sent off in the home leg of the Championship playoff semi-final against Sheffield United. I mean, and this is absolute supposition. We will never know. But when you look at that second leg and the number of goals that Forest conceded, surely they wouldn't have conceded that number of goals with you in the side. And you just wonder what if had Mark Clattenburg not sent you off that day?
Yeah, I mean, and that was naive of me in hindsight. And later on, and as I got older, I probably wouldn't have made that challenge. But I was one of those kids that just wanted to express myself all the time. I wanted to show everyone what I could do, and I played on the edge. And I think now I would have had to change the way I played with tackles. And it was probably when I only got to 30, and I just wanted to be so good. I just wanted to help the team so much and never let anyone down. And I just played on the edge. It was a terrible touch, and then I thought it was harsh. I didn't lunge. I made the tackle. It wasn't as though I went in with my studs showing. We'll never know that, will we? But no, it was just, devastating. And going to Sheffield United and watching it, I was in with the fans. The atmosphere was incredible, and you just couldn't believe after it to see how close we'd been, and not even to get to the playoff final. It was so disappointing. I mean, Wolves that year that went up, they were physically. They had senior players. We never know. You see what they did to Sheffield United, and they were, for me, the best team in the playoff position. So, but we never know. Unfortunately, it never happened, and it's something that I had to live with, and it's still to the day devastated that you never got the chance to play in that second leg and see what. But that's football. That's it.
You obviously went on to play in the Premier League. I wonder, as you, I don't know if clashed is the right word, but you come up against Mark Clattenburg in the future. I wonder if you ever asked him about it.
Do you know what I did? I got on really well with Mark Clattenburg. It was, I think he might have sent me off again, actually. But he was one of those referees. Yeah, I think he might have done. He was one of those referees. He wasn't ignorant. He wasn't arrogant. You could speak to him. And I think I come across some referees that you couldn't. And that really got on my nerves. Like, look, I made mistakes and they make mistakes as well. But just have a little bit to get a connection with a player saying, look, I thought I might have made a wrong decision. And Howard Webb was the best for me for that. He'd book me and then he goes, well, right. And I'd tell him if he was right or wrong. I'd say, no, you're probably right there, Howard. And that's just how I was. I was on his player. And like I said, I don't believe it was a red card. In this day and age, yeah. I just don't believe I went with my stud showing. It was the side of my foot. It was late, yes. This day and age, it would have been a straight red without a shadow of a doubt. But you can't tackle this day. But no, Mark was a referee that I really liked. Just not at that moment in time.
No, absolutely. You touched on Paul Hart and the kind of the fear factor that he had as a manager. I wonder how important you think that is, in terms of bringing young players through, which obviously he'd done at Leeds before with Kewell and McPhail and people like that. How important that was as he brought you through. Would you have made it without that?
Yeah. And Woody always, Jonathan Woodgate, when I played with him, we always speak about Paul. I was the kind of guy that pushed myself anyway, and the standards had to be good. But Paul was there. Some people say he might have been too hard. But as a young kid coming through, it sort of stood me in good stead. But that was where I came from, my family. I always did everything to the best of my ability. And so, look, but he gave me the opportunity. It was brilliant. Discipline. You couldn't get away with it this day and age. Kids are different. I've shared changing rooms last year with players. In no way would you get a response for them. That's it. That's what we're in. You see, there's ways of managing them and trying to get the best out of them. That the money that they earn, certainly in the Premier League, you can't fear them because they'll just. I've shared dressing room with players who earn £150,000 a week. If you put that, they can down tools, no problem. It's just how the game's revolved, and you've got to buy into that. It's ex-players in my time. In my day, it was this. You can't talk about my day now. It's where we are in this day and age, and you've got to get into it, and you've got to try and revolve your mentality in the way you're going to work with it.
And that's happened pretty quick, hasn't it? Because if you think about, Harty was what, 2002, 3, somewhere around that era. For less than 20 years on, it's completely changed.
Yeah, definitely. And I worked with Gary Megson as well, who was a very demanding and fierce speaking person. But then I think when you went to the Premier League, I think that made a difference. I worked with Harry, and Harry could let you know, but I think on a daily basis, players, and I say this, how do players have so much power? Money talks. It really does. And you say, well, how do managers? There's ways of doing it, because if you come in and you slag them off, players got down tools, 100 grand a week. You've got to buy into that, because whether it's right or wrong, that's where the game's gone. That is it. We deal with it, and you've got to try and get the best out of them players when they may be dipping. And how is that? Yeah, there's times when you come in and throw your shirts. I watched a game this season. I was thinking that wasn't good enough, but you can't do it on a weekly basis. If you lose, you've got to try and keep, not too high, not too low. But yeah, it's certainly revolved in I suppose in a short speed of time. But I think that comes down to money as well as everything else.
I was going to ask you about your move from Forest to Spurs with Andy Reid, who's been on the channel actually, and kind of, I don't want to put words into his mouth, so maybe you need to watch it back. But he talks about you being a kind of a late addition to his deal. Is that how you remember it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been linked with quite a few clubs in the January transfer, and the problem was I had a stress fracture in my shin. So I was playing with it in December, and this is other things that fans don't realise. I'd never wanted to miss games. I remember playing, I think it was around about the 20th of December, and I woke up, I think we played Sunderland. I woke up the next day and I couldn't walk. I was like, what's wrong with my shin? So I carried on playing. This is how it was. Then I was playing with a stress fracture. I get to 70 minutes. I was like, my shin's not right. Eventually, I got to a point where I can't play. And I thought, how am I going to pass a medical? And then a few clubs had been linked. And then the Spurs one came on the final day with Reedy. And I went there, and it was touch and go, because we didn't know what my stress fracture was. I had scans, nothing picked up. It was only when they injected dye into me, and it goes to your bones, and you can see straight away, as soon as you could see a stress fracture in my shin. so I signed there on the last day with Reedy, and I was out for another 6 to 8 weeks. So that was really, really hard moving to London. Well, and then when I got my debut against Liverpool, I'll never forget it. It was an incredible time. And I talk about injuries. My misfortune for not being able to play there for 6 weeks, but then there was 4 or 5. So that is fortunate that I got my opportunity. Martin Joel said, "Are you ready to play?" And from that day, I went in like I did at Forest. No real expectation. There was players that were far superior, far further ahead than what I was. But then I got my opportunity. We drew 2-2, got man of the match. And I think Martin Joel was probably surprised how well I played and that I could deal with it at this level. To go to Anfield, it's wow, what a place it is. I'll never forget it walking out. You'll never walk alone. When I still hear it on the TV, I get goosebumps. I was there doing some work last year when they played Crystal Palace with, I think, 10,000 there. It was after COVID. And I got goosebumps and emotion. It's an incredible place to go and play football. And from then, I kicked on. And I think I surprised a lot of people.
How big a step did you find it between top end of the Championship and playing in the Premier League at a club who pretty much demand at least a top half finish? That would be the absolute minimum, I would suggest.
Definitely. Look, when you play for Forest, the expectation, it's a heavy shirt to play in. Without a shadow of a doubt, those fans expect they're brilliant. They turn up in the thousands week in, week out. When they were in League One, it's an incredible football club, and I wanted to start anywhere else. As Nottingham Forest, giving academy players, they still produce them now. But then ultimately, I wanted to play in the Premier League, so the step up was big. But you are playing with better players, you're playing against better players, you're training with better players on a daily basis. So your standard has to go up. You have to try and improve. You're in the limelight a lot more. You're on TV for every mistake you make. So that was hard. But you sort of deal with it. You do. It's just you go into it. As a footballer, you sort of, your profile goes up straight away. In 12 months, mine did when I went there. In Nottingham, everyone knows you. But then when you move out, you're not. But then when you are in the Premier League, you sort of go bigger.
Did you enjoy that?
You deal with it. That was a play.
You deal with it, but do you enjoy it or not?
Yeah, it's not an instant thing. That's what I always say as a player. You gradually go like that. Most people, you're playing in a first team, so you've gone from youth team. You know where you want to get to. You want to be a superstar, and so that comes with. It happened at Nottingham. When I was at Forest, I was a youth team player. You'd be able to walk around the city with no problem. Then all of a sudden, you're playing and everyone's talking about you. You're in the papers, and then people start recognising you. You're knowing you a lot more. So it's no different when you go to the Premier League. It just goes a bit bigger, where you can probably go to different cities and no one knows you when you're on TV every week. And Super Sunday's match of the day. That's just how it is. But I just love being a footballer. I would never, the 20 odd years I had, I would never change anything. It was an incredible journey that I've been on.
Do you remember your first mention on, I don't know, Match of the Day or Super Sunday on Sky and what it did to you, how it made you feel?
I don't actually remember my first one. I remember my first goal, so that's when it was made, right. And people. Now I'm in the media and the pundits. We always know as defenders who score goals, they get a lot more recognition. And my first goal against Chelsea, that was it. It'd been 4 years since Spurs had beat Chelsea at White Hart Lane, and we beat them 2-1, 1-0 down. And Chelsea's team at the time, Terry, Drogba, Cech, Robin, they had Lampard. They had players that were just incredible. There were superstars. Ashley Cole, they were superstars, not just like in football, but there were icons as well. So that was massive. That was probably when it was like, wow, that sort of changed a little bit to beat Chelsea Super Sunday, and your profile goes up. But I remember from a young age at 18, I'd go back to mum and dad's in Yorkshire, and my dad would buy the papers, and you'd be in the paper linked with clubs. So your friends are talking about you, but it's just how you keep your head, and you have to keep getting better. I say my nephew just made his debut for Celtic, so he's got there. He's done amazing, but you can't take your foot off the gas. You've got to keep going because it can soon change. I've seen it in football. Many a player who were far superior to me had way more ability. If you take your foot off 5%, it then makes you an average player. So then you don't get to where you maybe deserve to or should get to.
There's much more to come on the way from Michael Dawson. He'll talk about his second spell under Sabri Lamouchi at the City Ground as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video. If you like it, it'll send it to more people. If you subscribe, you'll see past and future videos pop up on your YouTube feed as well, and you'll see more and more over the coming weeks and months. Need to thank my members of Chippers Club who continue to support the channel and help it going forward. So thank you to Carl Thorne, Tiny Media, Philip Sheldon, Chris Annable, Paul Harrison, Christian Tonnies, Perry, James Sorden, Thomas Newton, Mark German, Alan Francis, David Shelton, Mark Davis and Ez Chowdhury. They are my gold members. Thank you for your continued support. It makes a real difference to the channel going forward, as it does if you're a silver or bronze member as well. What you get out of the channel is you get to see the videos a week before non-members. You get to see the videos without YouTube adverts on them as well, which I know to some of you makes a real difference. You'll see the full interview, the unedited interview as well, and you'll get my thanks if you're a gold member on the channel as well. If you want to sign up to become a member of Chippers Club, which will hopefully help you and help me with the channel as well, the link is in the description below. Let's get back though to Michael Dawson. At Spurs you played under quite a few managers. At Forest you didn't have that many in your time. And it seemed very different kind of characters as managers at Tottenham from the outside as well. Ramos and Redknapp and Pochettino, kind of wildly different personalities, you would think.
And that was something that I probably experienced foreign managers. I'd only worked with English managers at Forest with Paul, Joe Kinnear, Gary Megson. They were the managers that I worked with, whereas you go to the next level, you're working with foreign managers. I went with Martin Yolo, who I thought was fantastic. I had a group of players that he got playing for him. We all loved him. And then Ramos came in. He couldn't speak the language. That was completely different way of training, different way of playing. Coming to England for him, I thought he found it hard. That was probably my first time in football that I went through a period in my career where I had no confidence whatsoever. And now I look back, when I got to the age of 30, it sort of stood me in good stead going forward in life because I went through an awful lot then. I thought my Spurs career was coming to an end. Got a lot of criticism, and that's when it was hard for me. It really, really was on a personal level, not just on a football level, because everywhere I went, I was getting stick. It was hard. And I speak about connection with the Forest fans and the Spurs fans, incredible. But I did go through a period there where one, as a team, we were struggling, and two, me individually. So that was a real hard time. But as soon as Harry came in, incredible. He got me back playing to the best format I had in my career. Got me in the England squad. He got me to a World Cup.
How did that happen? How does what is it that Harry Redknapp has that gets you out of that slump and
confidence?
Playing for England?
Yeah, confidence. I say this, Rob. Now I'm in the media and punditry. I can see players going through what I went through then. So I have empathy for them. I do. People sit there and sit behind the screen. It's easy when you're there. It's easy to say he's not playing well. I look at a player at Manchester United where some of the things he does now, and a few years ago he was a world beater, and I feel for him. He's got no confidence whatsoever. He's under scrutiny every minute of the day. And if you could pay for confidence, a lot of people would buy it, and you only realise that when you come out the other side. I was getting brought off. I was out of the team, but then Harry came in. He just had belief. We had 2 points from 8 games with Gareth Bale, Luka Modric, Robbie Keane, Ledley King, Berber, to 2 points in 8 Premier League games. Wow. That's a team that's getting relegated. You're talking about world-class players who have been arguably the best players in the world. Gaz was in the top 3 or 4 in the world not long after that with Messi and Ronaldo. And we had 2 points from 8 games in the Premier League. He came in, we had a happy camp. He let us go out and play with attacking football. He didn't do a lot. He just got belief and making players believe that they're good players. And we ended up, I think, finished 7th or 8th that season. It was remarkable after 8 games.
Yeah. It's just a difference in character, isn't it, sometimes as a manager?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you had it at Forest with Harty to Joe Kinnear, I would think, and then Joe Kinnear to
completely
Gary
different.
Megson, completely different personalities.
Completely different, and that's what makes good, bad, indifferent, getting the best out of players. But it's a group of players what you have to deal with. Everyone's in different way. And taking over from Martin Yol, it was probably a tough job for Juan de Ramos because Martin Yol had sort of made us as a group and took us to a 5th place finish. And you think we missed out on the last day of the season to West Ham to finish 4th to Arsenal. And then Harry Wando came in and we were having a nightmare. He took sources away, took everything away. So it was just a miserable place to be. There was he struggled with it. So for Harry then to come in, it was an easy job. It was an easy job. You talk about wanting to take jobs over. It was an easy job for him. He didn't have a lot to change because he had the players, but we weren't performing. 1 collectively and 2 individually, we were way off it. But it soon changed, and it wasn't too hard for him. And then we got to finishing 4th, Champions League, get to a quarter final. We're going to play Real Madrid. How that happened with the same group of players, really. We signed 1 or 2, but no, everyone was there when we had 2 points from 8 games. Unbelievable.
Yeah, amazing. I want to fast forward a bit to Hull because you were let go to go and sign for Hull, which I seem to remember on the face of it at the time seemed from a distance an odd decision. One, for the club to sell you, and secondly for you to decide to go as well. So how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, that was a big time in my life. My wife was pregnant. She chanced to move north, and I was on holiday. I wasn't expecting to leave. I'd played 38 games a season before. Mauricio Pochettino came in. The bid had been accepted, and it was Steve Bruce. You talk about manager, it was probably because of him that I left. He tried everything to sign me, and I was like, in hindsight, it was a wrong decision because I got relegated. I stayed up the year before. But I went through a period in my career, like I said, with when AVB came in, and I didn't play from August till November. And I was 26, 27 at the time. And I thought at the age of 30, with 2 years left on my contract, I couldn't go through that period again. It was the hardest time. I love playing football. And I left. I nearly left earlier from Spurs to QPR. They offered an awful lot of money for me. They offered a ridiculous amount of wages, but it wasn't the right time. And I believed at the age of 30 Spurs wanted to bring another player in. So whether my game time was going to be limited, so I didn't then play till Christmas. If we had a crystal ball, Robin, we'd be all right, wouldn't we? I wouldn't have gone. I might have still, because the player they brought in didn't set the world alight. 12 months later, they signed Toby Alderweireld. Incredible signing. He was brilliant for them. But at that period, I probably shouldn't. I got relegated. But I'll tell you what I did do. 12 months later, I lifted the trophy at Wembley and got Hull City back to the Premier League. And it was an incredible feeling for myself from where I was 12 months before, thinking, would I get back to the Premier League? Where you've dreamed and worked so hard to, with 10 years there, and then you get relegated, you think, wow, but we did. And it was an incredible journey, that. So, yeah, it was probably a move that wasn't great when I got relegated and the wrong decision, but that's life, isn't it? You've got to live by your decisions. It probably dictated to what happened early on in my career where I didn't play for 3 months.
And then a few years at Hull, obviously, I'm kind of fast forwarding through a little bit because Hull went up and down and whatever. Coming back to Forest, how kind of, because that was floated seemingly a transfer that seemed to take about 3 years to happen or 3 seasons to happen, because it was happening for ages, for months beforehand.
I mean, it was a dream come true. I spent 4 years at Hull, and the first year was tough when I left the club that I'd loved in Spurs. Heartbreaking to leave. So I go there, we get relegated, then we get promoted, then we get relegated, and I stayed there. I was 30, probably 4 at the time, I think. Playing every week in the Championship then, and then Aitor Karanka came, and Forest had seen that I'd got promoted the year before. I'd played against Aitor's team against Middlesbrough when we got promoted, and I was captain of Hull at the time, and he obviously thought I want to sign him. Knew I had the connection with Forest, and we tried to make it happen in January. Unfortunately, it didn't. I had 6 months left at Hull, and they were in a relegation battle at the time. So I can understand their point of view, but it didn't help me wanting to go back to where my whole career had started. But thankfully it did. He came back in the summer, and in my latter stages, my first year, it didn't really go to plan. It didn't go the way you want it to. I played against West Brom. No, it was Bristol, I think, my first game that season. And then I didn't play for a while, which was strange because we drew under Aitor. And then I picked up bad hamstring injury just before Christmas under age. So I was just getting back in and I picked a bad hamstring, really bad, and missed the whole of that season. It was a bad hamstring injury, tendon in the top of my hamstring. But then, and I thought going into my last year, there was times where I thought, how do I come back from that? But Sabri came in and we just clicked. We really did. And I set the season off to an absolute flyer. And unfortunately, we were top of the league. And I went to Stoke and pulled my calf. And I never from that time really got back to play where I had been for 12, 13, 14 games, I think it was, going into the Stoke game. I was fit. I was playing well, confident. And from that calf injury, I came in and out. We got beat 4-0 to Sheffield Wednesday. And from then, it probably didn't happen. Sabri kept me because at that age, you get to a point where you know you're not going to play every week, which wasn't a problem to me. I wanted to help the young lads. I'd had a great career playing just under 600 games, which if you'd asked me when I walked through the door at 16 as a YTS player at Forest, you said, Dad, I said, where do I sign? And I'll do it for free. But no, and then Sabri signed me because I was good in the dressing room. I was good for him. I was any problems the lad had. And it was easier for me. If the lads weren't happy with him, I'd go and tell Sabri and he took it on board. It was me, Watto and Grabs. He had a good 3 senior players in the dressing room there. I mean, Grabs and Watto, especially after Stoke, were playing week in, week out. So any problems I could say, because it wasn't an issue. He didn't have to worry about playing. It was generally trying to help Sabri and help the football club get to where we get to. And then COVID kicked in and it was just a nightmare. It really, really, really was. We failed. We underachieved as a team when we missed out on playoff. And I took that personally to come back and as a failure. As captain still of the club, whenever I played, I was captain. And not to be able to get over the line and have the slump that we had, that was a long 3 weeks when we lost to Swansea. And Sabri took it personally. He was a great guy. I still speak to him now. And yeah, and we never recovered, and he got sacked 5 games, I think it was. We lost all 5. And ultimately he knew that when you lose games, managers are not stupid, players are not stupid, you get sacked. And it probably had to happen. Unfortunately, after that, Chris came in and I was never really involved. I had a connection with Chris, who he was magnificent for me at 21 when I signed for Spurs. And he just obviously wanted to go younger, which wasn't a problem. I was just probably disappointed I wasn't involved with the group a lot more. I trained Monday to Friday. He let me do my media work. He was brilliant in that capacity. And I went in with a smile on my face, knew it was going to be my last season because I wasn't playing, and I'm not stupid. People are asking what you're going to do. Well, if you're not playing at 30, 37, it's probably time to hang your boots up. I wasn't willing to go down the leagues. I didn't try and do that. I wanted Forest to be my last club. I said when I signed for the final year that if I'd have played, we'll see what happens next year. Started, and I didn't play enough football to reward another year's contract. So that was it. I wasn't willing to go down and finish where it all started.
When Sabri brought you in, I kind of thought there's a manager in the making. There's a first step on the management ladder, if you like, or the coaching ladder at least. Is that something you were thinking of at the time, or what's happened since?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I was there, Robin, the club was good to me when I was injured. I did my B license at Spurs when I was 30, so I got that finished. Then by the way, coaching takes a long time. You don't just finish it in a year. It can take 4 or 5 years to get your B license, your A license. It's not a quick turnaround. So that probably took me a year to do my B license. That was fast tracked, working with the academy there at Spurs. And then I put it on a back burner because I had my little boy. So we'd moved and I was doing a lot of travelling where we were living. And then when I did pick the injury up, I went on and started my A license. So the club were really good to me doing that. I was working with the youth team at times. And then I got back in the team playing, and it's hard to do 2 things, Robin. You know what it's like. I wanted to focus bangly on playing. I didn't want to go, I'm coaching and then not play. And then sort of, when I wasn't playing, I looked at trying getting that finished. I'm just in the process of nearly finishing it any time now, my A license. But yeah, I finished and live back up in Yorkshire, and it's one of those where now you're coaching. I do the media, which I love. The opportunity came to work for Sky, which I say as players, it can be tough when you're finished. For me, it hasn't been, that transition hasn't been tough because I've gone straight into working with Jeff on a Saturday. On Soccer Saturday, it's great. I get to go to games. Ambassador for Spurs, so I go to some of their games and do bits and bobs in the week with them. So my coaching's sort of gone on the back burner again because I've been so busy doing that. And I always say about opportunities, Robin, it's like, where do they come from? Skype up the phone. You can't just go, can I come and work for you? That's not how it works in life. Do you know what I mean? We all want these great opportunities, and they came to me. So I've been very, very lucky. But the coaching at this moment in time, that's on the back burner.
It feels like as well that the Sky thing, it feels perhaps like not like a football team, but it must have that kind of dressing room environment to a certain extent. Do you know what I mean? Kind of,
definitely, yeah.
You can't replicate it, but probably as close as you can get.
No, definitely not. And you're going on a Saturday, you're in the morning, it's 6 hours, it's a long 6 hours, but all you do is talking about football. And it's only your opinion. Doesn't seem my opinion's right. The person who sat next to me, that's how football is. And that's what I say about players and managers. Sometimes they like you, sometimes they don't. And I pass that experience on to young lads that I speak to, and not even young lads at the football clubs. So try and turn that opinion around, because I did with AVB. He tried to sell me, and I trained every day. We didn't see eye to eye, by the way. We had our arguments and disagreements, but in the end we didn't speak, and I trained every day, and he must have thought I need him on side. And I remember playing Liverpool and West Ham. We won both games. I was captain. He'd give me a new deal at the end of that season. So right. you can change people's opinions by being a good pro and working hard. And I think that's what I tried to pass on to the lads at Forest at the end of my last year. Is it doesn't matter who you are. If a manager doesn't fancy you or doesn't want you, that can happen. But still go in and train hard, and don't disrespect your fellow pros who are training and let training down. Just go in with a smile on your face, because you're doing something you love. And someone else might take an opportunity, or it might be an injury, and you might get the opportunity, and it can change. And that's anything in life.
Dawson, it's been great to catch up again. Thank you so much for your time, all the stories and all the memories and everything. I really appreciate it. Great memories, Robin. And it's nice to see you. And I hope all positive. Actually, the weather here is not too bad, but it probably won't be like it is where you are. It's probably a bit warmer here, I think, mate.
Look at you.